Namaste, beautiful souls. I am joined by the incredible co-host of My Health World, My Health Podcast, Dr. Gregory Dunn-Smith, darling. Always a pleasure.
Got the full name introduction today. Hi, Carrie, and hello, everyone. Hello, everyone joining us for our podcast today. It's great to have you with us.
Well, we've both got hyphens in our names now that you're married.
That's
You've got
true.
The hyphen in your name.
I love the hyphen.
Hyphen.
Just gives you a little bit more to work with.
I've got a hyphen in my first name, Carrie Ann. But look, everyone asked me what to call me. Call me Carrie. Call me Carrie Ann. Call me Goddess. Call me Carried by Grace. I really don't mind. Queen.
No. Starseed.
Just no expletives.
Yep, preferably.
Preferably, unless it's required, and then that's okay. So, Greg, sovereign health and the zombie apocalypse. We've got a mighty name to start us off with the theme of today's podcast. And let's explore what that means. Sovereign health, first of all, we're talking about our divine right to choose what is right for our physical body, but also for our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health. At My Health, we are always about the physical and the metaphysical. It's why we have so many beloved students, because we have a tribe that want to go so much deeper than regarding ourselves just as a physical layer. And we choose not to be automated little bunnies that take injections and scoff drugs and have a remedy and a pill for every little ailment. We'd rather sit with ourselves, back our spine up against a tree and be in nature and inquire, Jnana Yoga, inquire, what is happening to me? Why is my body responding in certain ways? Why is my knee like a red alarm that's a beacon going, pay attention to me, pay attention to me? It's never a punishment. It's always something that's going to give us a sense of what's happening in the mystical, in the ineffable realms, because that's who we are. When we remember we're a soul having a physical experience, not the other way around, and then the body is simply a tool, is simply a beautiful way to go deeper into the mysteries of who we are. So it's always beautiful what's happening to the physical body, even in illness, even in disease or dis-ease, we would say. Greg, what is your definition of sovereignty and how it relates to our sovereign health?
The term sovereign to me is a paradox because it can portray our own power, so our true freedom as a being. However, in doing so, this is the only way that we can connect truly to the world around us. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there, isn't there? It's almost like I, as a sovereign being, I want to have absolute freedom in terms of where I go, what I do, what happens to my body, my mind, my spirit. However, when that occurs, when I have true freedom, I become vulnerable and I become the all-loving vibration, which therefore connects me to all living beings and the greater cosmos. I think it's about the vibration for us as humans. It's about choosing the vibration of, there's two vibrations, that's it. There's the vibration of fear, which condenses and contracts and it withdraws. And then there's a vibration of love, which expands and it opens. They're not emotions, they are vibrations. They're not emotions. Fear is not an emotion, it's a vibration. Love is not an emotion, it's a vibration. So we can get rid of emotions, just talk about the frequency, talk about the vibration. And when it comes to being sovereign, we're talking about the vibration of love. We want to expand, we want to open, we want to be free. We do live in a world where there are nefarious, where there are some evil, where there are sources and places and people. There are things happening which are vibrating at a level of fear. And because of that, we've had to have our protection up, haven't we? So we've had to actually start questioning, and is this good for us? Is this not good for us? And what's that going to do? And do you do this? Will I do that? Or is that what you do? And what does the doctor say? What does my mum do? What does Carrie Ann do? But again, this is still the vibration of fear, because it's saying, well, what's right for me? What's right for me? If we can somehow get back to the vibration of love, we'll know that there's no need to keep questioning whether it's right or wrong or right or wrong. But in order for that to happen, we've got to have a big cleanup of what's going on, particularly on planet Earth at the moment, because unfortunately the ego has led us astray, and we've fallen into the trap of relying too much on our logic and less on our sovereign, less on our soul. So what do you think?
We're really at a time, we're really at a time where we're being invited to go fully within and connect to source energy and make our own determination of what is appropriate for our health and our well-being. And it's incredibly exciting. So, you know, as you've just said, we're not even listening to the so-called gurus anymore. In fact, we've seen many gurus. We did a podcast recently, falling off the pedestal. We simply cannot look outside of ourselves. There are no answers to be found. And this is where we get into vertical ascension. This is where we get into the energy rising through the chakras in a vertical way to lead us through the galactic or the cosmic gateway back to source energy, because we're in the golden age of Gaia. This is ascension time, everyone. So let's get excited and let's choose to rely on our heart's knowing, or any chakra vibration where you feel truth. It's powerful.
I think it's important for us to really step back and look at, from a soul level, look at what our mind is. The mind, or the ego, the logical mind, but look at it for exactly what it is, for a tool which has helped us as a species to live in a world of danger. Because, you know, the mind tells us, remember what happens when you touch that hot plate. Remember, don't go near the edge of that, you know, tall cliff. The mind is so useful. It can remember someone's name. It can remember where that cave is because that's where shelter is, you know. So that's part of the ego. It keeps us safe, which again is still in the vibration of fear, but it's been useful. However, I believe that it's reached a stage where we have been seduced into thinking that the logic mind is the be all and end all, that no matter what our intuition, our soul, our sovereign intuition tells us, we actually have to trust what the mind. And the difficulty with the mind is that it's quite often wrong. You know, our mind, as we know, look, we're being told at the moment to trust logic and to trust, you know, what the science says, which is strange. And this has happened at other periods of history. It's not just 2021. But at the end of the day, the mind is often wrong. That's why we have things like anxiety and depression, and because sometimes the mind can be led astray. There are neurochemical factors, there are biological factors, there are genetic factors, there are nutrient deficient factors, there are toxins which can accrue in the mind and in the brain. There are, you know, certain things that can affect how the brain vibrates, like tumors and things like this. So it's time for us to stop putting so much emphasis on the mind, I think, and saying, well, let's look at solution A and solution B, and which one is better for the most amount of people. And, you know, I think we've been led astray.
Oh, we've been led astray. We have to remember that the mind is simply a servant of the soul. The mind is a great creative visualization mechanism. It can create outcomes for you, experiences for you through the power of imagination. When the mind is dictating to you, or when the mind is dwelling in fear, it can be your greatest enemy. And this is where we're seeing these nefarious forces tapping in on that part of us, wanting to control the mind. So we might actually term that the left brain. The right brain is the one that's creative, intuitive, spiritual, sees in technicolor. The left brain is all about rules and logic and analysis, and it sees very much in black and white. It's rather boring to me, and yet we're seeing, and this is the other part of our title today, we're seeing the rollout of the zombie apocalypse. Now, let's break down, what does it mean to be a zombie? Well, we've all seen the zombie movies. We understand the apocalypse means end of days. Now, this is not a scary term, actually. End of days is exciting because we're going to see the end of a certain era, an end of a certain way of thinking, an end of plugging into a reality outside of ourselves, rather than trusting that deep knowing, that imaginative process within ourselves, that we actually are the creator beings. We are the ones who withhold the greatest technology here on the earth plane, greater than your iPhone, greater than any new app. You are, my darlings, listening to this, you are the technology. You are the golden child. And so if you want to embrace end of days, meaning stop tapping into the third dimensional matrix, go within, create 5D reality or even higher dimensional reality, because this is what it's about. This is an opportunity. However, the zombie apocalypse, if we were to put those two together, what we're seeing is the masked creatures getting around, rolling up their sleeves, taking the jab. At My Health, we're never here to tell you what's right nor wrong, but we are the curious observer all the time. We are the witness to what's playing out before us. And to me, everything's theatre at the moment. You know, you've used that word before, Greg, the pantomime, and it's so apt because it really is a pantomime. Suddenly I'm in a black comedy and it's all around me, observing people
and using that word, I think it helps. It helps a little bit with the deep feelings that we all wake up occasionally when we just go, I can't do this I can't put up with it anymore. For me, stepping back and just going, oh, well, you know, if I go to the shops and everyone's wearing a face muzzle, and for me, I just go, oh, they're all in costume, like they're dressed up. Yeah. And one of my friends said that to me last year when we first went to a restaurant after the opening up of the restaurants, and they had the big rigmarole of this check-in and this, and you had to sit this far apart, and if you stood up, then this would happen if you sat down, and if you danced, and you could kiss, but you couldn't kiss there, and you couldn't touch. Oh, the rules.
Well, you can't sing anymore, John, because the particles might fly out and infect
But instead of trying to understand it with a logic mind, for me, I just went, it's a theme. I'm like, oh, it's kind of a theme, you know, or it's a comedy hour, and it's not. This is an incredibly serious time, but at the same time, what we're saying is, if it gets a bit much, just remember, you know, look at it like theatre. Step back and you don't have to be entertained, but step back and watch it. Theatre's not always entertaining. We go and watch movies and make us cry.
Yeah, it removes the judgment.
But it's an act.
It's an act. And if we remember, there's a beautiful yogic term called Leela. It's all Leela, they say, meaning it's all divine play. It's a cosmic joke. And we say that not to, and as you said, of course it's serious. And for people who are sick and for people who've lost their businesses, their jobs, many people have suicided. So we're not for 1 second saying don't sit in the depths of your emotion and feel what you feel, because actually we're the people to tell you to do that. Go deeper, because there's transformation within those spaces. We don't simply want to glide over it. Have the dark nights of the soul, fall into the pit of despair, do what you need to do to go through that, and therefore transcend that energy and move back to Leela, move back to the divine play, seeing it all from a higher or cosmic perspective. And we say it's a cosmic joke because this is a hologram. We are living simply through a video game that we are an avatar or a character within, and we cannot afford to allow any circumstances, any experiences to take us down into a state of permanent chaos. It doesn't exist. God is light. Goddess is laughter. We are that divinity. We cannot be anything else. So you are entitled to 1 minute want to gnash your teeth and pull your hair out, and the next minute to be laughing about it all. Because when the mastery within us says, feel what you feel in its full depth and in its entirety as it arises within you. And anyone who has experienced grief knows this, because on the one hand, you can be experiencing deep loss and devastation and feeling like your world has ended. And in the next minute, you catch yourself laughing at a joke and you almost feel guilty for a while. It's like, oh, I'm laughing. I should be feeling, you know, this depth of grief and sadness and sorrow. So it's a really good training for us to know that energy, emotions, always in flux. Let it be in flux. Ride the waves of it. Don't get taken down. We're not meant to be taken down. That's why this fear programming, this mongering that's going on at you, simply throw your TV set out and get back to nature, have a laugh.
You know, there's one word that just keeps coming through when we're talking about, I assume most people who are joining us today have seen a movie about zombies, right? You know, I've seen heaps. You can just watch Michael Jackson's Thriller video if you want to go back to the 80s and check out the zombies that were there. I loved that when I was a kid. This is the thing. The template of a zombie, if you want to call it a zombie, or someone who is a follower, someone who they are operating at a space where they are being remote controlled. They are being controlled by, they think they're being controlled by their mind. But again, remember, the mind is very different from our soul, our sovereignty. The mind does not have the capacity to be intuitive and to connect to a channel. If we're talking to someone who is psychic, who is channeling, who is intuitive, who is working at that level of consciousness, they're going to be working through pineal gland, crown chakra, heart chakra. They're not working from the mind, right? So as a zombie, they're actually repeating a narrative which they have accepted. And you've got a really, really nasty combo at the moment, because we've got people who are, they've got a really unhealthy dose of cognitive dissonance. Okay, so they think there's no way that that could happen. And even if I was to start thinking that, my whole life would be over. So they shut that out. But then on top of that, they're full of toxins, because you've got people who've been drinking, drinking the Kool-Aid for generations. And whether that's they've been taking synthetic medications that have caused massive dysregulation to things like thyroid or reproductive hormones, or brain chemistry, pineal gland regulation, things like that, which we know, this is stuff which we know now. It's not just a theory. So if you've got a little bit of cognitive dissonance, you've got a body which is full of toxins. And then on top of that, you have got a massive wash, a tsunami of information coming at you that is telling you this is what to believe. And don't forget, we have been set up at the moment with supercomputers in our hands. We walk around with them every single day. We are so used. This is how we've been almost raised. It doesn't matter what age you are, but if you are alive right now in 2021, this is how you've been raised at the moment, is to go, turn the news on, check what's happening. Oh, and then I have to hop on the train, so I watch my phone. And then, did you hear this? And, so the information is coming at us. And there's no more this and that with the information, because we've got censorship, mass censorship, like, it hasn't happened for probably thousands of years. So when you've got those three things happening, when you've got people who are toxic, they've got a good amount of cognitive dissonance, and then at the same time they are being brainwashed 24/7. That's it. You've literally got because what they're doing when they're out on the streets walking around with the zombie muzzle on, they're not connecting. They're not saying, hang on, is this what I should be doing? And I don't need proof of this, because when I walk outside and I see someone, I live on a river. So when I'm walking the dogs and I see someone on the other side of the river who is not even within screaming distance of anyone around them, and they're walking along in the sunshine with their big face muzzle on and their gloves on, I know damn well you do not need a medical degree. You do not need to look at research. You do not need to do anything else. There is no way that a human being with enough intelligence to go for a walk would think that that's something that's going to protect them from the deadliest that has ever been around. That, to me, that's all the proof I need. So you're absolutely right. We've got these zombies, but I think today, what we really want to hit home about is you've got zombies. Let's say, for example, they're 3D. You've got the sovereign being, so they're working more towards a 5D level. But where do we fit? Sometimes I can feel really 3D. Sometimes I can feel like a zombie. Sometimes I can feel really 5D, like when I was at Uluru last year. What about the 4D? What about when you're flickering in the middle? So what kind of things can we do if we really want to be zombies, or if we really want to be 5D? This is not something that they're going to tell you on the news. This is not something that you're going to read on your smartphone, because it's been censored left, right, and center. But at My Health, that's what we want to do. We want to look at how we can help ourselves and how we can help you to make the decision. Now, if you honestly want to live in a world where you are being controlled, absolutely 100% controlled, maybe that's because it feels safer for you, more comfortable for you. Maybe it's because you believe that it's the right thing to do. You just want to get back to normal. These are things that I hear every single day. You just think it's, the polite thing to do. It's compliance, the government, whatever it is. Cool. Then that's where you're heading. So you can keep doing that. You can take this and this and this. That's fine. But let's now look at the people who are maybe flickering in between, or the people who are looking at working the other way, because you can have 2 feet on either side of, this line. But at some stage, you're going to have to start walking down a path, and it's not easy. But the
2 roads have presented. two roads have presented themselves, and we'll be talking to Steve Strong again very soon about this. And if people haven't listened to Steve Strong, go and have a listen. He talks very much about the Hopi prophecy and the two roads, the bifurcation, maybe another way. So today, just for fun, we're calling it the sovereign health path and the zombie apocalypse path. Now, we're putting it into human language so we can see a depiction of what's unfolding. And as Greg has rightly just said, you could have one foot on one path and one foot on the other, and they're the people we wish to speak to. We know in our tribe, many people 2 feet are on the sovereign health path. Great. It's still useful to listen to this podcast because it may give you some tools and some words and some descriptions that you can pass on to others. For those who are 2 feet on the zombie apocalypse path, remember we're having a joke as we say that. It's not a judgment. That's wonderful as well. And in fact, what I've come to realize is that many people want to be part of a nanny state, meaning they want to be told what to do, when to do it, be assured of a handout if they happen to lose their income. They certainly are not ready in a consciousness sense to go their own path, to rely on their own instincts. They actually would prefer to be told what to do. And so we must hold space and reverence for those people who are simply at that part of the continuum of consciousness. Would we do it? Absolutely not. Do we reel in horror? Absolutely we do. Do we want those people to awaken? Yes, hell yes. However, you could shake them until they're blue in the face and you're blue in the face and nothing's going to make a difference. So don't even try, wish them love, allow them to be where they are in terms of their soul journey. But for those who are teetering on the edge, are willing to fall off the fence and maybe trust in a new way, you have to be willing to remove science as God. So what's happened in terms of this industrial age, or I guess I would go back as far as since the age of where Atlantis fell and probably we all, sank and scared ourselves and thought we've stuffed up our civilization. What are we going to do now? And we allowed in the nefarious voice of science. Now science, and I've had so many people, because I'll get on forums and raise my own hell in my own way. And so many people, their first response to me is, what's your medical training? Now, why is that relevant? Because even within the medical fraternity, and I'm talking to a doctor right now, thank you, Greg, even within the medical fraternity, there are myriad difference of opinions. We're seeing so many wonderful medical doctors coming out now. In fact, I would encourage everyone to go and listen to Dr. Carrie Majeb. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, but she has come out and said that medicine was okay up until about 10 years ago. It was doing what the purpose of it was, even if people didn't choose that path. It was okay. But in the last 10 years, it's got a very dark agenda attached to it. So I often look at the elderly population who, I guess they went through the years where they saw, their classmates dying when they were at school, and they do rely very heavily, therefore, on medicine, on Western medicine, because they saw death. They saw what could happen if there wasn't medical intervention. So we have to remember that. But if, according to Dr. Carrie, if the agenda has changed in the last 10 years, if it's now about patents, if it's now about literally barcoding humans, owning them, keeping ahead of these so-called mutant strains of the deadly virus, so that you are heavily dependent on pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. As Greg said, we're already toxic. And that may not be even from our own free will. That's because it's coming through our water, it's coming through our food, it's coming through chemtrails. But of course, there are many people that willingly go and, take their antibiotics round the clock, that, have like a box full of pills that they go through every morning. I mean, I had a wheatgrass shot this morning, guys. Like I grew the wheatgrass. I juiced it myself. That's my medicine. If you need medicine, go for the plants. There's so many other ways. But unless you're willing, for those people sitting on the fence, unless you're willing to replace sovereignty with science, meaning your soul knowing you are the radar, you feel your way through what you need to do for your own health, as opposed to listening to the so-called experts in science, then you're going to remain lost. And Greg, you know this because you are a doctor. So and you can speak the speak, you know all the medical terms, you do the research, but why is it, and I'd love to know this about you, and I'm sure many people want to know this about you, how is it that you hold space for your soul and above all of that logic and all of that technical advice?
Look, I've definitely come down different paths. When I was at uni, when I was studying science, I really fell in love with it because for me, it was this is just for me, but I do think this is the same for quite a few people who come down that kind of medical training route. For me, it was an elevation of the ego. It was a way to get easy admiration from people, from peers. When I look back at that time, I think there was an element of me that still wanted to have, wanted to be on the pedestal. I wanted to have people say, oh, well, look at you, you've got that training, you've got that degree. I never wanted to earn a huge amount of money from it. That wasn't my driving force, but I loved the fact that, my parents would be proud and everyone else would be proud, So for me, it was actually, I don't want to say it was egotistical, but there was an element of the ego attached to the training, because as much as I wanted to help people, it would be incorrect to say that's the only way that I could have helped people, because I was already a yoga teacher. I was already a healer. I could have easily gone down a different healing path. For me, there was something alluring about saying, well, I'm a doctor. I'm registered with, in Australia, we've got our doctor's registration. I've got the big clinic, things like this. That only lasted about a year, maybe 2 years. And really quickly, it fell apart for me, because as soon as I started looking at, in depth at research, and I really started to analyze the bigger picture, it lost a lot of the shiny appeal for me very quickly. I think, to answer your question, one of the ways that I am able to stay true to what my soul is and what my soul desires is I have worked continually to strip back what my ego tells me will make me happy, and I have really honed in on what my true soul values are. And if you're listening to our podcast right now, I would urge you to do this. I did this with our level 1 trainees just a couple of weeks ago. I said, if you don't know what makes you happy at a soul level, you will forever be lost, because with the zombies we're seeing at the moment, I feel for them, because, and I talk to people every day who say things like this to me, they believe that the only way to be happy is to get back to a state of normal. But the irony is, if I was to ask them 2 years ago if they were happy, they would say no, because they didn't like their jobs. They go out and they get drunk, and then they get hungover, and then they work out they've spent too much money. They were traveling, but it was always stressful, and then there was all these problems, and then they had to get home. And, you cannot tell me that majority of people living in developed countries were happy. I treat people at my clinic who have more money than they know what to do with. We have Maseratis and Ferraris rocking around on the Gold Coast, but they're being treated for anxiety and depression just like anyone else, because the bigger the income, the bigger the bills. And then if you flip to the other side of things, where we've got the developing nations, they're at the complete other spectrum. They're not happy, but because they don't have water. So we've got this incredible inequality in the world. So I would ask each of you to really take a look at what makes you happy. Not you in terms of, well, I feel happy because I've got my new car, or, oh, there's that new movie coming out, I'm excited to watch it, or I found a new girlfriend, I found a new boyfriend, or whatever it is. It can't be external. And Carrie, you know that I've worked on this a lot, because coming up or growing up as a kid, as a pretty unhappy kid who was unhappy with myself, I found that the more unhappy I was with myself, the more I needed. So what makes you happy? For me, it's spending time with nature, spending time out. So I'm not going to make a list, but I'm asking you. For Carrie and I don't want to say we're fortunate to live the way we live, because we have created this. We've had difficult conversations with our family and with our friends. We have chosen to make specific decisions to set our life up in a way that appeases our soul. People look at us every single day and say, you're crazy. People say, but you don't work 9 to 5. There is so much of my life that's not normal. And Carrie Ann, living on the island, her life that's not normal. But in line with that, we are actually choosing things which make our soul happy. And the funny thing is then, it can't be taken away from us. Looking at the zombies, though, I understand where they're coming from, because they know that if they can just tick the boxes, things will go back to normal. We did a podcast a little while ago. I didn't do it. Sorry, Carrie did the. Was it a podcast, Carrie, about grief, or was it a Dharma talk on My Health TV? It might have been a Dharma talk about grief and about embracing death. I talk about this a lot because it's just so important. That's the big, draw card that they've got hanging over our heads at the moment, is that look at the numbers, look at the death numbers, look at the death toll. And that's completely manipulated. It's completely manipulated. We know that. WHO has admitted that. CDC has admitted that. Everyone's admitted that.
People seem shocked that we're being lied to, because we have this belief that the mainstream media would always be on our side, of the government. People find that bridging that gap, that cognitive dissonance, incredibly difficult, because it means that perhaps your whole life has been a lie. But if you don't jump into that river of change,
what's the matrix?
Then you will remain tied to the system, to the establishment. Which, again, as we're saying, that's fine. If that's what you choose, no problem. So we're having some people that don't know that they have a choice, and so. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. But for those who have heard the other side, may call it a conspiracy, they're battling at the moment. And of course, the starseeds, the light workers, the ones who came to assist humanity to rise, they're battling too. But that is useful, because that assists them in their consciousness journey to know how to approach this, to know how to maintain love within their heart and within their soul, whilst they're dealing with the ridiculous. With this paranoia that's en masse, because we're certainly not paranoid. I've never worn a mask. I don't take any pharmaceuticals whatsoever. I'm 46 this year. Like, I'm radiant and glowing. I'm in perfect health. And I know that I am. People say, oh, well, but you must be concerned about your future, because don't you know that as you age, no, I do not buy that script. It is my sovereign choice what I plug into. Just watch me go, everyone. Having said that, if I do end up with some dastardly disease, that's okay too, because that will be a beautiful training ground for my soul. It will enrich me in ways that I couldn't have without that experience. But the point is, there's no fear. I have no fear of any of these outcomes. Paradoxically, will I feel fear if I get that diagnosis? Yes, but I'm not sitting here in a state of fear, concerned for that. I will deal with my emotions as it comes. So we're not bypassing. We're not about, as I said earlier, we're not about not diving into the emotions. In fact, we are teaching you at My Health, and anyone who's trained with us over the years, and we're into 23 years now, Greg, of running this business. We know what we're talking about. We've seen the results time and time again through thousands and thousands of our graduates. When you do the work, and Greg, I know you're going to be doing a Dharma talk about this soon, about just simply doing the work. Stop controlling the outcomes outside of yourself. Move inward to the creator being that resides within you. The guru is within you. The sovereign is within you. Take the space, do the work, and then you will show up to whatever experience happens in the video game, in the hologram outside of yourself, with absolute curiosity and with excitement about everything that's been shown to you, because you created it for your own highest good. It's wonderful. This is a place of bliss if you choose it. This is a place of orgasmic pleasure. If you choose it, you can have it all. So, Greg, what came up for me, because we are a yoga school, so I guess I tend to relate everything back to yoga. What came up for me when you were talking about the zombies is the wheel of samsara. And when you spoke about people, if you asked them 2 years ago, were they even happy? They want to get back to normal, but were they happy then? And, what I could see in my third eye was the wheel of samsara. So the mouse on the wheel going around and around and around and around. Isn't it actually exciting that at the moment we've got an opportunity like we've never had before to jump off the wheel of samsara, so that we're not in that birth, death cycle, or the cycles within our lifetime? We can literally start a new chapter, and we can evolve into the fifth dimension. So a lot of what we're talking about since we've started our podcast is that Mother Earth, Gaia, Tara, whatever you want to call her, she as an entity, as a body, is moving into a fifth dimensional frequency. Now, according to galactic stories, this has never happened before. Mother Earth has a golden opportunity to move from third dimensional experience into fifth dimensional experience. And so many people, and this is why there's 7 billion people on the earth, people have come for this galactic experience. And if you want to go into fifth dimensional frequency along with her, you have a chance like never before. I can't even put into words how that makes me feel, knowing that what we've come for. We won't get into it today, but maybe, Greg, we can podcast just about this specific topic, because it's so important. But you can research about this more for those that are listening. And but it's also too known that some people will choose to remain in a third dimensional reality. And according to the Hopi prophecy, as I said, I'm going to talk to Steve Strong again soon about these two roads and about this bifurcation. And what he says is that many people will die as a consequence of this jab. And we can't make that wrong, because what will happen is they will be rebirthed into a planet that will look like Earth, but it will be in third dimensional consciousness, meaning they will be having the experiences where to match it's an energetic vibrational match, or a frequency match to where their consciousness is at. So they will be going through these experiences like we have been. Just think about your own past life, this lifetime, past lives, if you have that memory of what it means to be in third dimensional frequency. But let's more talk today about where we're going. Greg, can you describe what fifth dimensional frequency is about? And you talked about the fourth dimension as well, and I guess it's kind of like our bridge, isn't it, over to the fifth? How would we describe that more?
I think for us, we were only learning this last year. And that's what's so cool. You and I, the rest of my health tribe, we had read, of course, we've read some books like Celestine Prophecy, and there's another really good book at the moment. I just got it the other day, called Gaia 2012, the project, which some of these books, they talk about the Earth's vibration, the human resonance rising, and how we, as conduits living between the stratosphere and the Earth crust, essentially how we are then affected by this frequency vibrational shift. So I think for us last year, it was a bit of a learning as to exactly what fifth dimensional consciousness was. At one stage, we thought we're going to come back from Uluru in a time warp. We're going to be able to do this and do this and do this. We're still in human flesh, so we still have the logic mind, and we still have our own cognitive dissonance. We still have our own doubts, our own fears. Part of me likes to just sit here on the balcony and think, what happens if I stepped off the edge? I'm not going to do it. But at the same time, I think, well, I'll never know if gravity doesn't exist until I do. So there's these weird philosophical debates happening in my head, but I know that that's a sign of fourth dimensional thinking. It doesn't mean I'm there yet. So what is 5D? I think it's a complete release of the fear vibration, the mechanism which contracts and controls. And it's a surrender into living in a state of complete and utter bliss, acceptance, vulnerability, and love. It's difficult to explain and comprehend at a logical level. So a lot of people will think, if you think of vibration or a frequency as a little buzz or a little hum, we actually, Bruce Lipton talks about this, Joe Dispenza talks about this, we exist at a level of a frequency where, the atoms which make us up, they're actually flashing and vibrating. They're not a constant solid. So it's more like the frequency that you listen to a radio. That's what matter is, rather than an actual solid. And that vibration shifts, it moves. So we're actually talking about everything moving in vibration. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love that. And we are more wave than we are particle. And once we truly embrace that, to know that we are energy, it seems that we're in a realm that is very solid, but they are just simply vibrating atoms. And having that awareness, that you can change reality. You can conjure up any reality that you choose. You have the third eye, the pineal gland, this receptor and transmitter, also the DNA. And if we explore what's happening, what is going on with the nefarious, evil that's lurking in terms of this jab. We know, and we've heard from many healers now, from many truthers, from many experts, there is awareness that this jab will scramble the DNA because it's a gene therapy, because it's a mRNA program, meaning the RNA communicates with the DNA, and it seemingly can bypass the normal structuring or the restranding of the DNA and cause it to go into some kind of loop, cause that DNA not to expand, not to grow. Therefore, we are stuck not only in a third dimensional template, we are also perhaps going to go into second, first dimension. It's difficult to know and it's difficult to put into language, but we no longer will have the soul attached to the physical body. We will lose the empathic wave, meaning we will not respond from the heart. We will see, therefore, the zombies become even more paranoid, even more controlled, even more hypnotized. And they will simply be plugged into the quantum AI computer. And this is the plan of the cabal, to plug in everyone's mind, because it's pure life force for them. They feed off it, plug into the AI computer. Now, we're already seeing it with our iPhones, how we're hypnotized by buy this product. They're gathering data on us, and then it's a feedback loop of buy this, do this. We're being programmed whether we're aware of it or not. So you have to be very discerning as to what's happening. If it goes to that next step where we don't therefore have access to our soul, to our sovereignty, to our knowing through our auric system, so through our emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies, if that is disconnected and floating somewhere in the ether and our physical body can't have that true communication, we then get sucked into the vortex of the AI computer. Therefore, we can be programmed, controlled. They can tell us, how we're feeling, what to think. They can give us diseases. Of course, we know that once we're chipped, we are barcoded essentially. From a biblical sense, we would call that the mark of the beast, the mark of Satan. And we can be told then you haven't been a good little citizen, so you're not going to get your little feed of income this week, and therefore you can't eat. We won't let you shop. You can't travel. You can't go to these stores. You can't go to this entertainment arena. I mean, for me, who gives the stuff? I don't want to be part of their world anyway. But I understand for many people, the leap from that world that we've been conditioned for and with into a new earth community where maybe we need to grow our own food and we need to source our own fresh water. Yeah, we might think, oh, that's a romantic ideal, and I'm going to do that. But the reality, whoa, that's going to take some courage and some inner work to make that leap of faith. But this is potentially what we're faced with, and I don't want to say that is what we're faced with because we're the creators. Remember, we don't have to lock into any particular timeline. Time exists in the now moment. We conjure up through the third eye technology, through our visioning, what we would like to experience. But it's useful to talk about because it possibly will be a timeline, because we're all part of a collective mission. If the collective says we're going to go to the zombie apocalypse and then the rest of us have a breakaway and we've got to create new earth communities, I've been exploring it. Absolutely. I've been talking to you about it, Greg, many of my friends, and, there's many of our tribe who reach out to me and say, are we going to do this? We can do it together. And people have got ideas. And if that's what's got to happen, thankfully for me, my dad kept all our farming land, and I'm going to say, Dad, I need that land. We're coming. We're going to do this. It's
listening to you say that. There's a couple of things that came through, and I'll say them before I forget them. So, firstly, I've got to say, I absolutely freaking hate the term anti-vax. And thanks to Denby Jane, who chatted to us on a podcast a little while ago, for really hitting home to me why this is such an important point. The term anti-vax is a divisive term which is used to censor, shut down, shut up, to stop the conversation and move on. I've done a science degree. I'm currently doing a master's degree. I understand how research works. I love science. I grew up as a kid. I was obsessed with reading. I used to read books about virology and bacteria when I was 5 or 6 years old. You know, one of the first books I read was a book about Ebola and how one day it's going to take over the earth. I've still got the book. I showed it to a friend of mine last year when this whole 2020 thing happened, because I said, I've read this book when I was about 6. You know, so what I'm saying is I understand quite a bit about science, probably more than, say, your kind of average person. I'm not an expert. Don't call myself an expert. This is what pisses me off, though. Up until now, even if you wanted to talk about something being scientific, that word carried esteem and prestige, and it meant you would have an educated, logical, calm debate about a hypothesis. You would present something and you would say, what are the pros? What are the cons? Where's the research? Watch it play out. You know, talking to people, my cousin is a scientist. My uncle is a scientist. I've got a lot of scientists in my family. They're people who, they don't necessarily want to take over the world and make millions of dollars and kill everyone. That's not in their nature. Scientists just love looking at how things work and how they can make something better. Now, looking at this term anti-vax, we have really been led so far astray with medicine at the moment. If we go back to 50 years ago, 100 years ago, if we look at what medicine was for, it was predominantly used to stop death. It was an emergency medicine. That's medicine in the war times, which is still around in certain countries today, absolutely. But predominantly that's what it was for. It was, you would have to go to the hospital if you were literally, if a leg was cut off or you were about to drop dead, and they would try and assist. Somewhere along the line, and we don't need to get into this because this is the past, and I believe some people, the conspiracy theorists out there, just get so obsessed with, well, who did what and why did they do it? I don't really care, because I want to be in the now. But if we acknowledge that at some stage in the past there was a shift, I don't know when, don't know who did it, I've got my suspicions, there was a shift between medicine that wanted to be productive and helpful into medicine which wanted to be controlling and divisive. As I say, I'm not going to harp on about that. I'm going to say exactly what's happening right now is we are actually spending more time on something which is asymptomatic, disproven, and controlled by a censored narrative than we are about real medical problems. Because I have no fear of death, but at the same time, I do not believe that we should live in a world where people are living lives with medical issues that we know how to solve. Millions of people already in 2021 died of hunger. That's a bag of rice would solve that, and water. You know, we've got people who don't have access to basic human rights, and yet in the developed world, we're talking about taking an experimental medication so that we can go back to a nightclub. That's where we're at as a society. That doesn't make someone an anti-vaxxer by saying, no, I don't believe in that. Let's also talk about the fact that this particular jab has been developed only as an experimental medication. It's been developed by companies with absolutely dodgy histories. I'm talking, you know, we've got companies like Medina who have basically failed because they kept trying to do this gene therapy, and then yay, after last year, they got a big hit of income.
And I'll let you go on, but even the name Moderna, modern RNA, they're telling you that AstraZeneca, the Latin translation is kill the star seeds. Like,
and then you've got companies like Johnson & Johnson. These are companies who, even if you just want to look at it at a 3D, if you want to look at it at a 3D level, these are companies which you can throw into Google and look at the history. Don't even have to talk about vaccinations or anything like that. Just look at the history of liability. And yet, where we stand right now in 2021, they have zero legal liability. That means that they have been given free rein to create whatever they want to create. We have got people who are stepping in between the camps of politics and medicine. We know that because if someone discovers the medicine, they are legally allowed to patent it, which means that by pushing that agenda, they're going to make a crap load of money. And this is only being administered because we're currently living under an emergency lockdown situation. We know that just in Queensland alone. We damn well know that on the 31st of March, the lockdown was about to end, which meant that emergency approval would end. And lo and behold, an asymptomatic case popped up. No, there's no one dying. There's no one sick. Nothing's going on. It's an asymptomatic situation. So that does not make us anti-vaxxers. I also want to point out that a lot of medicine which we are used to and which we talk about in common days, in common language every day, right? So back in the 80s and 90s, it was the pill. Are you on the pill? I'll go to the doctor and get the pill, get the pill, get the pill. Why the heck were we chemically castrating women for generations? Because they were telling us that they were having issues, they were having problems with their cycle. We didn't once look at why these problems were happening. Was it from environmental pollutants, toxins in the drinking water, toxins in the food, plastics, exposure to radiation? We didn't even care. I'm not saying what it was or what it wasn't. Nah, let's just chemically castrate them with a synthetic hormone. We're only now looking at the problems from the pill. And this is a medication which no one has a problem with. And yet we're only just now looking at why do we have PCOS and endometriosis and increased rates of infertility and everything else that's going on. But that's just one medication. I could go on about, antidepressants, which have very, very little effective research, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and there's no research that actually proves they do anything but shut down production of serotonin. And now we're talking about another one. Carrie, you mentioned, I've got to say this last thing as well, you mentioned DNA, which is so, so important, because if we actually look back, and if you're not scientific minded, just watch Jurassic Park, because that movie gives you a really good explanation about what DNA is. Deoxyribonucleic acid is the building block of life. And if we can actually look at what drives it, this is what geniuses like Joe Dispenza talk about at a soul level, what drives the DNA? It's not the mind. The DNA is being driven by something out there. It is the soul. It's a vibration. It's a universal energy, prana chi, that actually drives it. It drives the DNA. The DNA produces mRNA, this messenger RNA, ribonucleic acid, then creates all of the parts of the in the cytoplasm. So in the cell, it creates it all. Your mitochondria, your everything else, the cell wall, everything that happens within a cell has been created by the mRNA. What's really disturbing at the moment is there is no research being done as to if that goes back the other way, if the messenger RNA is going to have an effect on the DNA. And people are starting to wake up to this in the scientific field. Yes, they're being censored and they're being shut down, they're being taken off. However, if you start to look at it that way, perhaps that would explain, Carrie, what you were talking about in terms of the organic versus the inorganic timelines. Because do we want to have DNA? Do we want to have cells that are completely organic, that are vibrating in tune with the earth, or inorganic, which is a synonym to synthetic? What do you want in your body? Do you want to have, it's bad enough if you're going to have synthetic serotonin, synthetic estrogen, synthetic testosterone, then you're going to have toxins, and then you're going to have everything else synthetic in the body. But then add on top of that, now you're going to have synthetic mRNA as well. Me questioning that, me as someone who has a bit of an education.
You rabid anti-vaxxer.
That does not make me a freaking anti-vaxxer. And not only that, even if I speak up, which I'm legally allowed to do as a registered doctor, even if I speak up and say, excuse me, I don't really understand how this is appropriate, I get censored, I get shut down, I'm an anti-vaxxer, I get my license taken away. To me, there are major alarm bells going off. So yeah, if I choose not to have it, please do not go around saying, oh, listen to this podcast by Greg and Carrie, they're anti-vaxxers. You do not have the right to call me that title. That is not a title that I adhere to. I choose to fill my body with organic substances as much as possible. I retain the right to use medicine. If I choose to take an antibiotic, if I choose to go to hospital and I require anesthetic, if I choose to take any other medicine, that is no one's freaking business. That does not mean anything. And you are free to do the same thing. But please, can we stop with this anti-vax? Because we have got a clear choice right now, the organic and inorganic.
Make a choice. With the Hopi prophecy of the two roads, we have roughly 2 to 3 years and it's going to hit. So, I'm not saying that as a scaremongering tactic. I'm telling you to educate
the reality.
You on the spiritual ascension side of things. Make your choice and be the wise one. Be the sovereign one. If people don't know, when it comes to DNA, it's said that we currently have around 2 strands of DNA and the rest is so-called junk DNA. Now, the junk DNA, it's not a great term in my opinion, but anyway, that's what it's known as, is another 10 strands of DNA that has been, I guess, hijacked, Greg, would we say, if we're, from a spiritual perspective, has been hijacked. So if we have the potential for 12 strands of DNA to activate, can you imagine if we already have this powerful technology as Homo sapiens, what's going to happen? And I would say that the star seeds here no doubt have an extra strand of DNA. That's why they see the world so differently. And that's why they often get frustrated, because what they're seeing is completely different to how the humans, those with the 2 strands of DNA, are perceiving reality. So we're literally already in 2 worlds. So we have to remember that as starseeds, if you align with that term, that if you align with someone who's probably been the black sheep of the family and has understood spirituality right from when you were a little child. I mean, Greg was reading these science books about
even if you just have a longing to do something else than work 9 to 5 so that you can, complain on your weekends about, I'm going to get drunk on Saturday and then Sunday I have to get ready to go back to work. This language we have, it's Monday tomorrow. Thank God it's Friday. What are you doing on the weekend? If you have ever had a longing for something more, then lean into that. Yeah. Don't listen to the people out there that are telling you you've got to have a stable job, you've got to have this, you've got to have that. No, stuff it. If you want to play guitar at the end of the street and sing for your supper, who cares? But there's got to be, our soul is trying to come through with messages, and they're not going to come through when we're covering up our faces and over sanitizing our bodies and separating.
Yeah, so good, Greg. I mean, if everyone can just pause for a moment and just have an imaginative process, what would it mean to have 12 strands of activated DNA? What would that mean, guys? Let's all just project
another good movie.
We would have wings, right? We would be flying.
Yeah. Well, that's why that movie,
telekinesis, the supernatural
movie I told you about, Lucy, is so good because it actually, it said that everything which is unfolding, we've already been told through cinema and through movies. So that's really interesting. I mentioned Jurassic Park. Yes, that was the preview of genetic manipulation and mRNA manipulation. We know that. And then we've got The Matrix. That was a preview. There's a really good movie that I've watched many times, and I got Carrie Ann to watch it recently, called Lucy. Another amazing movie. Look, not all of it is going to be absolutely 100% scientifically accurate, but if you watch movies like that, at least they'll start to open a portal a little bit. I'm not telling you to sit there in front of Netflix and just watch all these movies, but movies that are actually going, hey, there's movies like Fifth Element, the movies that are showing the dystopian future, the organic versus the inorganic timelines and what that means. I wonder if there's some kind of connection between the 12th dimensional consciousness and the 12 strands of DNA. I don't know, but it's really interesting that we've got the dozen in each.
And also too, I was reading, Chris has written a new workbook for our second free healing program we're about to bring out. And I was reading his workbook, and he said about that we go up to grade 12. Now, why is that? And it never occurred to me before. Yeah. Why do we go up to grade 12 in our schooling system? Because remember, the cabal invert everything. They know what's going on metaphysically. They invert everything because we've got codes within us that need to see certain things. We need to see grade 12. We need to see love stories. We need to see certain things because the codes, it would resonate as non-truth if the code was presented to us in a certain way that we know, but they invert it and they present it in a distorted way. So, but why do we go to grade 12? I mean, 12 dimensions.
If we look at
12 strands of DNA.
How we've been raised. And look, we chatted about this in our healing program in 2020. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. But we've got television programs, we've got movies. Why are children being shown? I used to love Disney. There's no way I would show that to my children now. Shows that basically portray this romantic type of love fairy tale as a synonym for success. Again, what kind of values are we teaching children? What kind of values are we honoring and are we sharing when we're raising children and we're showing them that the only safe way to live is to cover up your mouth, stop speaking, step away from the other person, always be cautious of other people, fill your body up with toxins, no singing, no dancing. Again, for me, this is not about being an anti-vaxxer. This is about saying that is not how I want to live. Yeah. Don't forget, you're going to have people constantly saying, well, look at the numbers. Look at Brazil. Look at the numbers. Look at the UK. Look at the deaths in America. The deaths here, the deaths there. Am I saying this virus?
People are, apparently, this is how I interpret what they're saying, is that death was invented in the last 12 months. We didn't have death before that, apparently.
Oh, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not overly interested in morbidity rates, but as part of my studies, it's something that I'm relatively familiar with. There is a website that actually tracks how many people approximately have died of hunger each year. There's websites that track different death rates in different countries. I find it interesting because, you know, in my studies and with the continued education that I do, it's an interesting thing to look at. There's no difference with last year. We know that. We already know that. That can't be manipulated.
We've forgotten to celebrate death, haven't we, Greg? We've forgotten to celebrate death.
To that, it's got nothing to do. It's got nothing to do with the death, and it's got everything to do with you. They're trying to say, yeah, but you could die, you could die, you could die. If you're standing there just going, worst case is I get a respiratory illness, and yeah, I die. If that's the absolute worst case, that's my road. I choose it. Does that mean that my family's going to be sad and I'm going to be sad? Yes, that's a human experience. But I am not going to allow that to shut down the rest of the world. That's absolute lunacy. And if I was, this is the last point I'll make because it's a good one, but if I was to say, you know what, the most important thing is that we stop death. The most important thing, you cannot pick and choose where that applies. So if that applies, and I'm talking to government and politicians and anyone who is abiding by that mainstream medical view. If you are saying at the end of the day, the most important thing is saving lives, then you better be stopping people from over drinking and ruining their livers. You better be getting rid of cigarettes. You better be doing something about the suicide rate in Australia, because you cannot pick and choose. If you are taking my sovereign right away from my health, you don't get to pick and choose which part of it. It's only my lungs that you get to help, whilst everyone else gets to continue doing things that are detrimental to their health. Where is there any type of equality in that? So that's where I question you to start really waking up and understanding if they had our best interests. Yeah, absolutely right.
And it's absolutely arrogant, Greg. They're so arrogant, the government and these zombies, that believe that they know when it's the soul's time to exit the planet. Oh, it's not this time. We have a blueprint of when we enter the planet and when we exit the planet. And please don't tell me that you are above God. You are not above God. No government, no science, no zombie, no sheep, no human, no starseed. No one is above God. You have
no yoga teacher, no acupuncturist, none of us. We're not above God. We're part of. Yeah,
you're part of it. We are God. We are God. But so is that other person that you are telling. I mean, the beautiful people in the nursing homes who are screaming out, please, please, I would prefer to have my family around me than to be lonely and die of a broken heart. Yeah. We have become
you've got people
by
in
nature
hospital
to commission
who are
that.
dying. You know, this is where there is no way that you could argue against this. There is, if you're sitting in hospital on your deathbed and yet you can't have someone come to visit you, where? You tell me where that's got. I'm not even talking from a moral or ethical standpoint, but even if you want to go medicine, what, you're scared that they're going to get a lung infection when they're about to die? This is it's absolute lunacy. So to finish up, I want to ask you, because this was one of the most fundamental things that we wanted to cover today, and I want to make sure we covered it really well. So I'll ask you, how do you, I don't want to say define, but what's your download on the separation between organic and inorganic? Now, that could be 3D to 5D, organic to inorganic. It could be between the soul and the mind, or the soul and the body. But if we're talking about this jab in particular, it doesn't have to be just this jab, because we know that there is a range of things that are happening at the moment with what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're being exposed to, certain frequencies which are manufactured in the airwaves now that started last year in Australia. You know, at what stage do we start to go, hang on, I can feel that the soul is being separated? Because I know you and I have chatted about this particular scenario at the moment. Is there something that, is there a download that you have that you can share on that? Or is there advice that you can give to anyone on that?
Yeah, well, we had a joke the other day about, and I'm presuming a lot of yoga teachers, a lot of our graduates and trainees are listening to this, but if you don't know more the traditional side of yoga, there's a term in the 8 limbs of Raja Yoga called Pratyahara. So let me explain this for you, because Greg and I had a good joke about it. So what you'll hear, well-trained yoga teachers, it's not all yoga teachers, I have to say, in this modern era, but well-trained yoga teachers will talk about, once they introduce this at the beginning of a class. Pratyahara means withdraw your senses. So we know we have 5 senses that are interacting with the world out there. And when you take the jab, you will only be interacting with the world out there. This is how you can be easily controlled. And this is what we're saying. If you believe the world is solid and that you have no sway with your consciousness in how to change reality, then you're at the mercy of the dark control. So pratyahara, withdraw your senses. Withdraw the 5 senses inward and connect to pranayama, breath. Dharana, the breath is the object of concentration. Dhyana, meditation, leads you into samadhi, leads you into union with the superconscious. You are the superconscious, union with yourself at the divine level, or God, goddess, universal consciousness, whatever you call that, source code. We've all got a name for it. It could just be Mother Nature. It doesn't really matter. So if we have had the jab, and please know when I say this, I'm talking in a generalized sense. If you've had the jab, if you are about to have the jab, doesn't mean that you can't come back. You can. You can always change your own reality, but it will be a harder and steeper road for you. So for those who take the jab, pratyahara, withdraw the senses and connect to the AI, artificial intelligence, quantum computer. And this is the joke that Greg and I were having the other day, because that term will mean nothing anymore for people who've had the jab. Mm-hmm. You can't say pratyahara, withdraw the senses and connect to God. What are you connecting to? Because if you have been disconnected through the jab from your auric field, where do you go for connection? Let me remind you again, you can attach that aura again, but it's going to take a lot of healing and a lot of healers to assist you in that path. And I believe there's going to be a need for healers more and more as we go forward. If you haven't done our healers course, shameless plug, probably a good time to sign up for it now and get yourself trained, because you're going to be needed. Absolutely. In our healers course, it's not another yoga course. It's a healers course. So you will become a trained healer. It's worth doing just for yourself, but also to assist other people, because that's what's going to be required. Because people will be alarmed when they realize that this inorganic timeline means that they have been controlled within an inch of their life. I know that's not their intention, why they're taking the jab. I know actually that a lot of people have good intentions. They're doing it on behalf of all humanity. So that pure intention,
and it's the same intention. It's good intentions that mean, that's why you put the mask on, that's why you put the gloves on. I have people who say, someone said to me at a restaurant the other day, can you step back a little bit? People have good intentions because they're so disconnected from their intuition and from their soul. And that's the first sign, isn't it? That's the first sign of this disconnection, is when you're saying, well, regularly, as soon as I meet someone, you'd want to go up to them and chat, but and regularly, you watch someone's mouth and you're looking for signs that they're smiling. And the first sign of being disconnected from your soul, I mean, if you walk around, I don't go to shopping centers much, but if you walk around a shopping center these days and you see this, there is a lack of soul, because you're looking at dead eyes that are scared and withdrawn, and you're just looking at absolutely nothing. So I think we're already starting to see it, but we can't. You said it before, Carrie, and you said it quite well. It's not about judgment. I wish I could give you advice as to what to say to someone who is making the decision whether they do it or whether they don't. I have patients, I don't give that advice, as in not patients, but I have clients, I don't give advice. My family, I don't give advice. Carrie, I don't give her advice. I would love to say to someone, do what's right for you. I would love to say to someone, trust your own intuition. It's difficult to do, because I have people coming to me who are so sick and so toxic. They have no intuition. It's been shut down already. If I say trust their intuition, they're going to trust Channel 9. So it's such a difficult thing to do. I don't have the answer. I wish I had something, because I know some of you are going to say, what do I tell my husband or my mum, or how can I? You can't. The only thing you can do is be the shining example, be the vibration. I'm not saying you can't leave a couple of links to YouTube lying around, but you cannot plant seeds in concrete, to quote from Steve Strong. You can't do it. So we offer love, we offer compassion, but if that's their choice, that's their choice. That's okay too. We can love them. And yes, as you said, Carrie, we can work from a space of healing. I still have patients coming in. I still have clients coming in. We still have trainees coming in and students coming in who might have made one decision as opposed to this decision. I'm not going to say which is which. Of course, we still offer love and compassion. We understand why they did it. We support them in their choosing. But like you said, we can only estimate what's going to happen at a physical level, because up until, depending on which jab you get, up until 2022 or 2023, if you're taking it, you are part of the experiment. You are, you know, you're doing the human trials, whether or not that was explained to you. It should have been. Part of informed consent is actually letting you know that you're part of the trial, which you are if you've taken it, and if that's your choice.
Yes, because on all the websites, they clearly say the trials don't end until 2023. So you're right. You're absolutely right. They're not hiding that.
We know that.
This is why we're not the conspiracy theorists. We may be the ones who did the research and passed on the information, but don't point the finger at us. Greg, just to close this out, I want to hone in on something that you just said, which was so perfect. Be the vibration. This is the best way to shift the consciousness. We have to do the inner work. We have to be the vibration. We have to be the consciousness. Talking is great, and podcasts like this are great. But sometimes it's sometimes it's always beyond, the talk, the verbal. It's in the vibration. It's in the frequency. And remember, everyone, don't think that you're useless and powerless. You are so powerful, and your vibration adds to the unified field in ways that you can't begin to imagine. And it doesn't take many actually to be at a heightened level of consciousness to tip the scales to the frequency of love, because love quotient is much more dynamic than that fear quotient. So we don't need many of us to wake up. This is how the scales work. Remember that always. Remember, if you do experience fear, drop into it in its entirety so you can move out of it in its entirety. Don't hover above fear. Drop in, because otherwise it'll bug you for a few days and you'll think, oh God, how do I get past this? Drop into it. Drop into despair. Drop into depression. Drop into anguish. Drop into sorrow. Then you will naturally arise out of it, and you will hold even higher frequencies of consciousness. This is how we heal. This is how we move into fifth dimension. This is how we support beautiful Mother Earth. I love her so much. I want to cry. Greg spoke about Uluru before. Through that portal of Uluru that we have here in Australia and many sacred sites around the world, plug into your sacred sites. Use those sacred sites to send energy down through the song lines, the dragon lines of the earth. Let's do this as a collective. And what a beautiful chat today with you, Greg. Thank you so much.
And keep doing the work. If you're listening to this, we often say in our level 1 teacher training, module 1, I always say, I got this from you, Carrie Ann. If you've been drawn to this course, you've been drawn here for a reason. It's the same with the podcast. If you're listening to this, you're on the right track. So you can always come back to your own sovereign power. It can't be taken away from you. So you own it. You own your own free soul. It is who you are. It's what makes you unique. We honor that in you. And please just keep doing the work. Keep doing the work, because you're on the right track.
And we might close it out with a little bit of Thriller dance. What do you think? The little zombie dance?
Because this is Thriller. And we're fighting for our life.
We're doing it together. Love you all.
Thank you
Love
so much
Greg.
for watching, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste.